Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here and happy Public Service Week. We appreciate you joining us today. I'm Kate Nospish. I'm the Executive Director for 5 licensing boards at DPOR, and my esteemed colleague is Angel Deem, who is the Chief, and I'm sorry, Angel.
Chief of Policy for the Virginia Department of Transportation.
Thank you. None of us have short titles, correct? We're facilitating this conversation today and want to just appreciate you being here for the Lunch and Learn. And I think our topic today is something that seems to be in the forefront of a lot of conversations, artificial intelligence. It really seems to have just picked up momentum in the last, I'd say, 9, 10 months, and everybody seems to be talking about it. So we are very excited to have 3 incredible panelists with us today to share their insights on artificial intelligence. And I see they are all in the call, and we are going to give them each an opportunity to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about them. And then we will start with some hard and easy questions about artificial intelligence. So, Jonathan, if I could ask you to go first, please.
Sure. Thank you so much, Kate. My name is Jonathan Bibbs. I am a kind of a serial entrepreneur in several different fields. Primarily, those fields have been in real estate and education. I'm the former CEO of Richmond Prep, which is a private institution, K through 5 institution in Richmond, and I'm currently the community engagement director for New Schools for Virginia. I also am the owner of the CSG real estate sales team in Richmond, and I'm here just to shed some light on how AI is influencing how we do business and how we work in education.
Thank you. Marissa?
Hi, my name is Marissa Shalon. I am currently the risk analyst supporting a company called OTH Solutions. We work for the National Risk Management Center, which is the risk analysis service of DHS's Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency. Prior to this, I had 3 years as an emerging risk analyst for Meta. And prior to that, I was 20 years supporting the global war on terrorism and federal law enforcement as an open source intelligence analyst. So I started at the National Risk Management Center back in November, and things have definitely changed since then. So, and pretty much everything we're going to do from this point on is associated with AI. So hand it back to you.
Thank you, Marissa. And last but not least, we have Bob Osman.
Hello, thank you, everyone. My name is Bob Osman. I'm the Commonwealth CIO and also the agency head for the Virginia IT Agency, and I'm also an alum of the VEI. So proud to be back and speak to you all. In the AI space, there's a huge overlap between artificial intelligence and information technology. As systems become increasingly integrated, we're seeing that more and more of these software and systems and are including AI capability. I was one of the members of the working group that created the statewide standards on artificial intelligence, working with the Office of Regulatory Management. And I'm also the custodian of the AI registry, which is used in the state government to assess and monitor and ultimately approve the uses of artificial intelligence within the executive branch. So happy to be here, and thank you very much.
Thank you all. And so just 2 housekeeping things before we get rolling here. If you could please mute your phones if you haven't already, just so we don't have any feedback. And our panelists are happy to take questions as we go along. So if you would put them in the chat, Angel or I will read them out for the panelists. And I'd like to kick it off with you, Bob. How do you explain AI in layman's terms?
So when we think about artificial intelligence, we think about software, notably software that mimics human intelligence. So we're looking at the ability to make decisions, the ability to learn. That self-learning component is what differentiates artificial intelligence from other types of business and process automation that we have more traditionally seen. And so the ability for systems to mimic that learning and be able to provide decisions, that's how we look at artificial intelligence.
Thank you very much. Jonathan or Marissa, do either of you have anything you'd like to add to that definition?
No, I'd say that's a spot on.
Very succinct.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Angel now, and I will be monitoring the chat, and we are going to just ask some questions of the panelists, and we're hoping for audience participation if you have questions about anything that they are sharing with us. And so, Angel, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Kate. All right, so I'm just going to jump right in. This is a dense topic, so we're looking forward to learning a lot today. So thank you again to the panel. Jonathan, I'm going to throw the next question your way and ask you how you currently apply AI within your business portfolio or your area of expertise.
As I mentioned, I work in two main areas, and I'll touch on both. As it pertains to real estate, my use of AI is really centered around market analysis and using AI as a tool to interrogate data. It's very helpful to help predict where trends are headed, helps me to see insights in the market that I might miss through my own analysis. It also helps me to anticipate little things, like anticipate when someone might be willing to sell their house or when somebody might be looking to upgrade their home. So that's what I look at it at in terms of real estate. But on the education side, there are different opportunities, especially as it pertains to evaluating students, helping us to understand different patterns and what they're learning or where they may be struggling. It can also be very helpful in terms of administrative tasks. And it's also very helpful in distilling information down to more digestible nuggets. So those are the ways that I use AI on a daily basis.
Great, thank you. And I would like to have our other panelists sort of weigh in on that question, how you use AI to maybe to expand on what Jonathan was sharing as an analysis tool, or one that you're using to make data consumable or to do those trends analysis. So since our panelists have very different perspectives, I think that would be helpful. So Bob, do you have anything you'd like to share with us in that regard?
Absolutely. I think, as Jonathan mentions, I mean, there's a primary use case around the analysis of data, and AI has demonstrated to be a very powerful tool of understanding data, helping us to gain insight from that data. I think there's, when we look at a lot of the use cases, I think what the way my team's been looking at it is really in two ways. One is that there's the everyday use of AI, which is as a productivity tool, ways of making us more effective, and that involves things such as using like Waze or Google Maps to chart our path and navigate. It's having the basically Microsoft Office 365 complete your sentences and say, well, we think you're maybe going to send an email with this person when you enter in a couple keystrokes, because that's what you most commonly do. It's maybe making suggestions around different ways of providing other types of productivity tools like Siri and virtual assistants. Those types of tools are very helpful. So there's everyday AI that helps with the productivity. There's also game-changing AI that really changes the experience. This is where you're reinventing and recreating certain things. For example, some of the things we're looking at is how people that communicate and live in different languages, using artificial intelligence to translate websites and our digital real estate. that we know that AI can be a very powerful tool of helping us facilitate. It's not perfect, but it's getting better and better as the AI learns and learns what's the right answer and how do you write sentences. It's very helpful using AI to help us ask questions and sort through a lot of policy and procedural documentation. And one of the things we're very good at in government is producing regulations. And some of those regulations can be a little thick and a little complicated. And so if we could find an AI tool to help us navigate some of that space, I think that sounds very, very exciting. And I think using AI to help us plan our lives more effectively as citizens. And so I think there's a lot of different approaches to both drive productivity, a lot of things we can do to change the citizen experience. And so I think we're seeing more and more AI materialize around us in very interesting ways. And I think we're just scratching the surface.
Great. All right, Marissa, we'll turn it to you now. Again, just how you currently use it. I know you said everything you do is going to involve AI, so maybe specifically on the data analysis piece or looking at trends or predicting outcomes. Anything you'd like to share with us?
This might come as a surprise, but at the federal level and in my day-to-day job, we're not allowed to use generative AI at all. And it's primarily associated with security. So it is an interesting sort of watching the policy unfold, because contractors don't generally have the same restrictions, but you're seeing a lot of the government contractors, especially on anything that any company that supports a national security element, really looking hard at how their own employees are using AI. There's also different types of AI. There's generative AI, which is, I think, what most people see if they want to, build a picture of something or an image, or they want to write a piece of poetry or something like that. And that's the kind of AI that I think we're used to, or that's most like what I would call the homespun AI, the work that's done at that in the home, sort of like what we would do on a day to day, like a funny website or a funny picture. Then there's the sort of the large scale application of it in analysis, and this is where things get a little bit more complicated, because the tools have to look at very complex and very large data sets, especially at the federal level. So it's been a lot more slow at application. And then, of course, you have the questions of security. Now, in more recent years, like what I use it for personally is summarizing reports. I began doing in this, and this is very common at Meta, was to, if we were looking at a problem set, to essentially gather information and then have it summarized, which is what a lot of people do, like summarize the last 10 articles on this topic, or anything like that. It's the skills. I'm looking at it more from a practical or an operational perspective. So it's like, okay, what kind of skills does a workforce need? What are the emerging risks, which is what I do for a living. So it's one of those questions that's a lot harder for me to answer. I use it for, I use generative AI to build, funny pictures, or help me with, some research I have to do, or build recipes. But in the day-to-day world, I mean, of the work I'm doing, it's a far more sensitive and nuanced issue.
Okay, so we'll kind of stay on that line of thought a bit, Marissa, with you, since you raised those security concerns, and I think too with state government that's there as well. And so there's care and how we can move forward with application. So, in your view, how can AI be used responsibly, and how do those recommendations trickle down to the state level? You know, most of our audience today are associated with state government. So, thoughts about that?
Well, one thing I like to tell people, I'm trying to build an AI governance capability within OTH Solutions, my employer. One of the things I like to try to emphasize to people is not to wait for someone else to do it. So at the state level, it's state leadership that has to look at it from a state perspective. At the local level, if you're looking at a county or a city, they have to look at it from their perspective and look at the risks, because the risks do change depending on where you are in the country, and every municipality has its own dynamics. It has its own economics. It has its own infrastructure that it has to secure. They know better than anyone at the federal level what are their risks and what are the best ways they can mitigate it. And at the federal level, they can always, you know, hire more contractors, among other things. But at the state level, at the locality level, you do end up having a little bit more, many more constraints on you, and it's one of those things where you are probably the best solution to the challenge. And if you, and here's something else to understand too, is that there aren't that many AI experts. Even at Meta, when I was at Meta, there weren't that many AI experts. Um, it's a very new field, so you people within your organization have to just step up and start asking questions and start making decisions and understand that this is a brand new world, and we're going to make mistakes. We're going to make good decisions. It's all going to happen. But I hope that helps. I mean, it's the way I look at it. There's a certain empowerment that's going to come from this. And just waiting for someone else to come up with a policy is you're probably going to be too late.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that is a segue into our first question in the chat, which is for put this out there for all three of you. What is the best way for a novice to begin learning about AI and how to leverage it?
I guess I'll jump in here. You know, in my experience in the classroom, what I've seen is that one of the best ways for humans to learn is through play. And I would encourage a novice to go out and to play around with some of the AI tools that are out there. Some of those that you might want to look into, you may have heard of Chat GPT. It's probably the most popular uh, uh, platform at this point. Another Google has its own Gemini, which is another uh, large language model that's out there. Then there's also Perplexity, which is a great tool for researching things. These are great places for a novice to go and start asking questions, start trying to prompt the AI to get outputs. Um, and then there's also just staying abreast of what's going on in the AI space. It's moving so quickly, but there are lots of opportunities to learn. Of course, there's always YouTube, which is where my journey began. And I think that is just a fun way to stay in the know and develop skills by watching others. So those are just some really basic entry level tools that you can use today.
Thank you very
Great.
much, Jonathan. Bob, did you want to add anything to that question?
The only thing I'll add to it is kind of the angle of recognizing that a lot of the attendees are state government personnel, and that is to recognize that we do have policies in place, that we have policies and standards in place, and so the governor issued Executive Order 30, that which directed all state agencies and to follow, the ethical use of artificial intelligence. Those policies were developed, and so I would suggest that members just do a quick read. We deliberately wrote them lightly, so that it wasn't. This is an 100-page document. It's like 5 pages, 5 pages on the policy, and maybe about a little bit more on the standard. But do a quick read just to understand how we're approaching it in the Commonwealth, how we're looking at trying to balance the need for speed and the need for productivity and value, at the same time exercising guardrails and caution, so that because a huge team worked together to create these standards. I mean, we had people from academia, we had people from industry, we had people from government, all coming together to try to craft a balanced, I call it a Goldilocks approach, just right approach on how we're going to kind of manage the space and do it safely, and not set ourselves up for legal exposure and or risk or loss of data and privacy, that once you lose these things, you can't get it back. I mean, sometimes it could be a Pandora's box. And so we wanted to put some regulatory control in place. So for those that are thinking about looking at artificial intelligence within their jobs, I mean, we'd definitely take a read and reach out to me or the team. If you have questions about it, we're happy to do that and respond. I mean, Marissa's comment earlier about how few there are in terms of true experts is spot on. There are not a lot of people that know this stuff beyond a superficial level, and so we've tried to gain that knowledge a little bit on behalf of the state, so that at least we have somebody who can look at this who's maybe a little bit further more trained and a little bit more able to kind of respond to some of these challenges and understand the risks. So I would say start with the policies and the standards. Love the answer in terms of YouTube. Huge YouTube fan, huge Reddit fan. A lot of information available from Google, from Microsoft, from AWS. All of them are charging hard into artificial intelligence. They have a lot of materials online, a lot of materials that are available for consumers, and so I mean this field is exploding. So I don't think there's going to be any lack of information available for people that are interested in learning more about this topic. I think you're going to have the other challenge of having a billion hits, when you start going down that link tree and saying, hey, how do I learn more about this stuff?
Well, let me ask before Marissa maybe answers that question as well that Kate posed. Bob, I was going to throw you the question as to VEIAA's position on AI, which you answered in part there, referencing the executive order, but I just want to give you the opportunity to, expand on that for our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. VEIAA supports it 100%, but we support it in a safe, ethical, and secure manner. So, the nice thing about artificial intelligence is that you can get a lot done. The bad thing about artificial intelligence, you get a lot of bad things done very fast at scale. And so being able to put the right controls around it is really important. And so what we're doing is trying to recognize AI that's embedded in products that we buy. I mean, VEIAA, we are users of artificial intelligence. We are developers of artificial intelligence. I mean, we are using chatbots, within Keystone Edge, so that when you're looking for tickets to submit to us and ask for services, you can use a chatbot to help navigate that. That is a generative AI large language model that we've created in terms of helping our customers better navigate processes. We are looking at deploying it with translation services. We use it heavily in the cyber world. I mean, we are finding that like many things, a lot of the bad actors are using artificial intelligence very quickly against us. And so we're using artificial intelligence to counter it. And it's been very interesting when you see like a denial of service attack, watching the AIs kind of work against each other to stay one step ahead. That's been very impressive to see. And so we are looking at pattern recognition. When you see some certain things happening, how do we identify those? How do we use AI to scan log files, massive amounts of data, to use artificial intelligence to understand when there is, nefarious behavior going on. So we're definitely all in, and we support the agencies going all in. We think that this is an area that every agency should be looking at, finding opportunities to become more productive, to change and deliver better digital services to their customers, and we're happy to work with all the agencies on this topic.
Great. Thanks, Bob. So before we move on to the next question, Marissa, I'll give you a chance to answer that question in the chat about the best way for a novice to begin learning more about AI.
I think I'll take a more practical approach to this answer and just say there's the topic you need, I think, to first look at is called prompt engineering. And you can go pretty much anywhere, Google it if you want. But for generative AI, prompt engineering is probably the most effective training for a novice. And it helps in a lot of different ways. With that skill set, you can get a lot more and a lot better results from AI. But I've taken courses on Coursera. I know the LinkedIn Learning has courses on prompt engineering. Google has courses on prompt engineering. They're very simple courses. It's not a lot. It's, a day, a couple of days of work. And the return on investment is enormous. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the skill sets I've been proposing to my company for our analysts and across the board. Like, so every business service and in every vertical in any company should have at least that one standard, which is that anyone who works with information in any way should have at least some training in prompt engineering. And it's interesting too when you look at it from a business operations perspective. The solutions you're finding are all verticals; they're not horizontals, and yet we're looking at it as a horizontal problem. So it's kind of the approach is still young. We're still learning how to approach the problems of, say, AI security, ethics, all of the other challenges that you face. But in the end, it is this one basic skill: is how do you talk to the AI, and how you talk to the AI is what you're going to get out of it. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. And I know we want to talk some about ethical constraints and considerations, but before we dive into that, I'll throw a question to Jonathan and just ask your thoughts on how AI. So we talked about some practical uses across different, business functions. How do you see AI impacting society on a broader scale?
Well, we can already see that it's become ubiquitous. I mean, you really can't interact with any software these days without bumping into AI somewhere. And most of us, almost all of us, are interacting with AI at some level on a daily basis, whether we know it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And it's even in the hardware that we're using at this point. I mean, even the webcam that I'm using today has an AI function. It is tracking my movements so that it can keep me in focus. Your iPhone does it. Your MacBook does it. So it's everywhere. I think the things that are concerning about how this will influence society is, especially as we think about inclusion, is how our biases as we train these models can be replicated in what these systems produce. And that's something that we have to be very careful of from an ethical standpoint. Also, there is the data privacy issue, which I think AI it's an exciting frontier, but it is also very scary what could possibly be available out there about all of us, all of our personal data. So I'm really concerned about the future of AI, and I'm trying to educate myself more about those specific issues. I think AI will also be a way that we can make things way more efficient, especially when it comes down to government services. Just as a citizen, interacting with the state or the city or the federal government is sometimes cumbersome. Sometimes it's hard to navigate the bureaucracy and know exactly who to talk to, how to get to the right person to get what you need. And I think AI offers a huge opportunity with simplifying those processes for government and for us as citizens. I think from a financial standpoint, I think this is the resurgence of the dot-com age. I mean, this is a huge opportunity for our entrepreneurs and new business, even from the standpoint of education, teaching people about AI, whether that's developing new strategies or new models for AI. It's just a whole new world. So I think it's really going to change the economic landscape as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anything from Marissa or Bob you want to add to that before we move on?
Only the sense that I think we have to be careful that we don't concede our roles and responsibilities. And this, I think one of the things we look at is that if you think about it, I had one person describe that we're going to become a instead of creatively creating new content, we're going to be editing content created by AI. And so we're going to become a society of editors in a way. There's also, I think, the concern that decision making, that just because AI created something and arrived at a conclusion or prediction or decision, that we need to make sure we didn't abdicate that decision. So if you look at somebody who's building a home or architecting a house or a bridge or something, that it's very possible that some of those things can, in the very near future, get produced by artificial intelligence. You ingest plans, you ingest information, you're able to recreate that, but at a certain level, a human has to look at that and say, yes, that is safe, that is secure. I'm going to apply good engineering judgment and say that that's going to work. And I think the same thing's true for decision making that we look at. If we're going to be looking at claims being processed and people getting awarded information or grants or making really high stakes decisions, there's got to be a human in the loop. And that was part of the policy that we put in place, is that for such decisions that affect people, that, in a meaningful way, that there's got to be a human in the loop making that decision. You can't just say the AI said it. So I just think about my kids. Well, the AI said it, I put it up in Chat GPT and it said, this is right. So it must be right. So you still got to own the answers, and we just need to make sure that we strongly encourage people as they move into this space to realize they're not abdicating their responsibilities.
Well said. Just to build on that, and Marissa, I'll throw this one at you first. How can folks be more in tune to detecting when something has been AI generated, understanding that it's probably in the background, as Dr. Bibb shared, of just about everything we're touching day in and day out. But if we have that interest in being able to discern that, how best can folks, come to those conclusions?
Well, I think first things first, trust your experience with things. If there's an output or some piece of information you're reading, it doesn't seem right in some way, it is, you can interrogate a piece of information and not just blindly rely on it. Another thing you can do is just ask, what's this data based on? Like, where are you getting this from? Is this from peer-reviewed studies, or is this off of Reddit? There are ways to ask those questions, and it's the kind of common sense that most of us have been raised on and educated into. So trust your own judgment and trust your own expertise at things. I mean, I've read things on certain topics and I'm like, I might not be an expert in that, but I know that's, certain words I won't say here, but like, like, so, and it, we get used to, and one of the aspects of it, which every everyone here has kind of already recognized, is that it's everywhere, and we're not to the point where it's almost imperceptible. And one of the things you can always ask yourself is, do I believe this, or my lying eyes? Is this really what we should be doing? Predictive AI isn't very good yet. I have to just be blunt. I've seen it. It can be terrible at points. But in some areas, it's already kind of taking over. And I think one of them is kind of surprising for most people, but I saw it firsthand at Meta. It was in coding and development, in actual software and hardware development. AI's taken over pretty quickly, because more than anything else, AI is very good at producing code for software. Very, very good at it, very quickly. You can produce a lot, but you're always going to have those subject matter experts around to interrogate output.
Okay. So
Angel,
I think that, yes.
We have some more comments and questions in the chat, if I may.
Okay.
So Keith wants to know, so we want to ensure that technology aids the human effort, right?
The analogy I like to use when I talk to people about AI is AI should be like a highly advanced calculator. Um, it helps us to complete tasks, but we don't completely rely on the calculator. We know when we look at that number, that doesn't seem right. We know when we know we need to be careful about the inputs that we provide that calculator, because if we don't give it the right inputs, we won't be able to trust the outputs. So I think that's exactly right. We need to make sure that the technology stays in its proper place. Bob is spot on about that. We've got to watch what we feed how we train AI with the data we give it in the front end, and we have to watch what AI gives us as we ask it for things to make sure that it is in fact reasonable and usable.
Agreed. Well, let me, so Kate, I see another question's popped up, but I want to make sure because I think this is probably paramount on a lot of folks' minds. So I'd like to have the panel talk a little bit more about the ethical concerns, and then we can pick up the next question in the chat. So just maybe hitting the treetops, if we could have each of you, from your perspective, share the ethical concerns with AI and how your work is mitigating that or considering that. And Bob, I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, we're attacking it from a couple of different angles. One is that we're trying to lead with privacy and cybersecurity to make sure that citizens do not lose their data. I mean, government's trusted with some really critical things in terms of the public safety domain, in terms of the health and benefits domain, financial information. We know a lot of information about our citizens, and so we want to make sure we guard that if at all possible. And so making sure that the data is being placed and protected. We already have cyber standards. I mean, AI does not change those. Every one of those standards are still in effect. And so we've got to really guard privacy first and foremost. I think the other thing we need to do is basically be intentional and apply science to the process. Make sure that we don't just trust industry. I mean, industry is racing very fast. I mean, they're coming out with some real amazing tools, but they need to be vetted. They need to be tested against real data and in our environment, and making sure that the conclusions that are coming back are conclusions that we can support, we can work with. And so there's got to be a very rigorous testing vetting process before we start using and deploying it at scale. And the other thing is to recognize the limitations. If you look at Gartner Research Group, I mean, they've recognized that generative AI is at the peak of the hype cycle. That means it has not hit the trough of disillusionment when we realize that we think it's going to do this, but it's really going to only do this. And so right now we expect so many things from generative AI, and yet as we get into the use cases, we're finding, it's not really not working the way we thought would work. And I know there's been a couple agencies, for example, coding was brought up earlier as AI you can fire all your developers because you can just now just run it, have the AI code it for you. Those projects have ended in failure. I mean, basically, they were about 70% accuracy in terms of coding, but not a single process worked. So you had to go around and find the missing 30% in a billion lines of code of what's not working. And so it's like, did we really save our time in terms of using this? Maybe not. That sometimes that's really hard. It's kind of like taking the whole novel world of War and Peace, running it through AI and converting into something else, and then saying, okay, now which sentence is right? Which of them matches the book? And you're like, holy cow, this is really tough. And so even though it can be very helpful, and we got to realize it's still a limited tool. I like to think about AI as a high potential toddler. We know it's going to grow up. We know it's going to get there. But right now, it's struggling a little bit to answer some fundamental questions. It doesn't mean it's not useful, but it just needs some maturing. And I think we just all need to be realistic about the industry and where it's at.
Okay, thank you. So underscoring your comment from earlier that we can't omit the human component as
Absolutely.
we navigate this. So Jonathan, from your perspective, ethical concerns and how you're navigating those?
I mean, the way the AI tools that I'm using are basically your consumer products. And the way I'm approaching the ethical concerns, which for me really center around how people's data is used, or how safe it is. I'm just being very careful about what I'm giving AI to consider. I'm being careful that before I'm giving AI anything to look at or analyze, that there's no information there that should be private. Also, I think, again, I circle back to this because I think it's so important, that we make sure that the data that we provide AI as we're training these tools, we have to make sure that our biases aren't being fed into the AI system so it can replicate that. Mm-hmm. That's a huge issue that we have to watch for. I think that's the big one for me.
Great, thank you. And Marissa, we'll round it out with you. I know you mentioned some ethical concerns earlier, so anything that you want to underscore for the audience today?
Yeah, I think the key at the executive level and in any form of organization is the governance aspect of it. And this is still emerging. And in some areas, there's no real experience yet. There's no real use cases of governance. But AI governance is one of those, it's going to be one of those key, I wouldn't say solutions, but mitigating projects for organizations going forward. And again, it goes back to the vertical structures of most organizations. HR is HR. Security is security. Physical security is different from digital security. You see different applications of it across different business units, and before you know it, you're dealing with a variety of ethical issues that cross over. You belong to you work for an organization, you're a decision maker in an organization that has PII. How is that PII being secured? Or PHI, which a lot of states and municipalities have to deal with. How is that being used? Because in some cases, some of it can be used with AI, but what and how? And moving forward, thinking forward 2 years, 5 years, how is that going to change? But I think it's the creepiness. It's the ethics of using it in human resources, in recruiting, the ethics of using it in employee relations. There's going to be a lot of tools associated with employee relations that are going to integrate this Is this something you want for, say, an employee assistance program?
Mhm.
Those are the kinds of questions that I don't think many people have asked yet, but we're going to be asking them a lot in the next 2 or 3 years. And that's where governance comes in. And that's where governance begins to ask those questions now rather than when something bad happens.
Great, thanks. So to the chat, great question here for Bob. Bob, if you could expand for folks on what agencies you see using AI or just evaluating its use, or if you're seeing specific areas of adoption that appear to be popular, or any common tools perhaps that you're seeing, if you'd like to share that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every agency I've talked to is at least thinking about artificial intelligence. I think that we have some very strong agencies. They're very progressive. They're always thinking ahead, and it is impossible to not think about what is the impact of AI in my industry. And I think they're looking at it really from two perspectives. One is what are some thoughts around how I can change my citizen experience? And the other thought is how can I use AI to be more productive? And so things that are coming up quite a bit, the reoccurring patterns of capabilities I'm seeing is one, use of AI in COTS products, commercial products that include AI as part of the solution. Those are conversations around how do we look at it, how do we understand it, is this a good use? And so we're seeing a consultative role to help them ask the right questions as they talk to their vendors that they're looking to buy AI. Another common use case is around chatbots. A lot of people are looking at chatbots. They're looking at different ways of trying to answer questions, whether it's for internal use for their staff to wade through a lot of data more effectively, or whether it's to provide it for citizens that might need to engage in documentation online. Is chatbots are a reoccurring theme I'm seeing both at the local as well as the state level quite a bit. Third one is around different ways of doing document ingestion, where we're looking at how do we accelerate processing? How do you take documentations coming in? For example, the EVA tool that we use for statewide procurement is they're adding an artificial intelligence component to scan incoming invoices so that they can really understand that invoice, try to auto key in some information into the invoice to accelerate the ability of a payment processor who needs to process that invoice, an AP clerk, so they can go faster and have fewer keystrokes in the system of record. So that's a nice productivity tool that can be very helpful. I mentioned around translation software to help provide different views into our Commonwealth websites. That's very common as well. And then, in fact, even I'll say I put a shout out to VDOT. Their work which is multimodal RM3P project up in Northern Virginia. That is a phenomenal project around really changing the way citizens experience and want to understand their travel options around how we can help them navigate a very complicated metropolitan area and provide information in real time that can help them prioritize and make good decisions based on what the conditions in the roadways are. And so there's some amazing stuff happening out there. And, I think we're just getting started.
Great, thanks. Okay, so another question that we have, I don't see Kate anymore in the chat unless I missed one. I'll throw this out to all the panelists, and Jonathan, I'll ask you to kick us off. How do you stay abreast? We all recognize how rapidly this is evolving, and I've taken lots of notes today with some of the tips you all have shared. But how do you personally stay abreast of how this rapidly evolving field, how to sort of stay on top of it for your interests?
Well, I have subscribed to several newsletters from AI developers. That's number one. And I stay abreast of conversations through various social media channels. Twitter is a great place to have this, to just jump into discussions. Well, it's not Twitter anymore, it's X, I'm sorry. But it's a great place to jump into discussions in real time with people who develop AI and use AI on a daily basis. Um, I have learned so much just from people posting tutorials or explaining their daily use there. As I mentioned before, YouTube is an excellent resource for this. Bob mentioned Reddit, which is a great resource for pretty much anything you want to know or anything you don't want to know too. Um, so there are lots of resources there. But I really think a cool place for people to get started with this is go on Chat GPT or Perplexity or Gemini and just say, what can you do? Just ask the AI, what can you do? Or what's the latest news in artificial intelligence? And you'll be surprised what it can provide you, at least as a starting place for your research.
I like that. Marissa, what would you offer in response to this question, staying on top of this rapidly evolving technology?
Well, it helps that I'm in essentially supporting AI policy. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm always getting asked questions that I don't know the answer to. So I'm learning as I go, right? Um, One of the things I do is exactly what Jonathan said, which is I prompt engineer and I get a summary of recent updates, and it'll be very specific though. It'll be what are the most recent, summarize the net last 10 articles on AI tools in human resources, right? And or it'll be something generally specific like that, like what has been, summarize reporting on the outcomes of AI applications in research and say any electrical engineering. Well, and you can get some output that's going to give you some idea of what's going on and on any given topic. The other thing I do is I've been going through, because I'm still fairly new at this, I've been undergoing training, and I do the structured training through Coursera, but there's other types. There's Udemy, there's LinkedIn Learning or whatever it's called now. IBM has its own training services, like its own training academy for a lot of this. Um, I also, because I have this emerging tech background, I'm often pulled into kind of integrating some of these ideas. So I was recently asked what my opinion would be of the application of quantum computing to AI, and I'm like, oh, give me a day. Like those. So I'm looking at it a little differently than most people, but the first place to start is really where do you see it right now at your job, in your home? Where is it? Is it, is Google or Amazon using it? How is it using it? Ask that question. How is AI being used in Amazon Prime? How is it used when I, shop online at, Giant or Wegmans? Those are the questions. And at work, how is HR using AI? What are the vendors? How are the vendors using it? Um, and ask those questions of your recruiters if you have third-party recruiters. It should be a question you ask, and that's the door in which you get to learn and you begin to accumulate a certain knowledge of how the topic is being used right now. I hope that helps.
It does, yeah, very helpful. And Bob, will round it out with you. Any tips you have for our attendees on how you stay on top of this evolving technology?
Well, I read a lot, so I'm a big fan of Gartner Research and the Infotech Research Group. Those are good sources of information that does a good job of distilling the high level stuff. I talk to a lot of people. I've had multiple conversations with Microsoft about Copilot. That's their approach, and how they're approaching that different segment, talking to Google about Gemini, and just seeing demonstrations. I mean, they're very hungry to kind of show us what they have, and I love Jonathan's discussion of playing with it. At some point, just get in there and play with it. Start asking prompts and get into OpenAI or ChatGPT. You can go in through Bing and and just do some searches and play around with different ways of phrasing, like Marissa talked about prompt engineering. That if you even change a couple little words, it can make all the difference in the world. And I remember when we were first crafting the standard, I started with asking AI. I asked Open ChatGPT, write a policy on on creating a standard for artificial intelligence, and actually gave me some good stuff. I said, oh well, I can just use that. So it can be really helpful. Now I'd say about maybe 70% of it was useful. It gave me 10 things, 7 pretty good, 3 were garbage, but that's okay, But at least that's 7 I didn't have, and so it gave me a way to jumpstart the process a little bit, and it was kind of fun to play around with it. So I think we're going to have to rediscover our capacity to play, and I think this is a fun area to do it. So
I agree. And the instances that have stuck with me were exactly as you described, Bob, where somebody just decided to give it a whirl and not be too attached to the outcome, right? But see what you get back. Yeah. All right. Well, our time is almost done, unbelievably. So I have one more question, and I'm just going to throw it out and see who's interested. All or one of you, hopefully, will be interested in responding. So we've talked a lot about some of the concerns. We've certainly talked about the pace at which this is developing. We talked about how pervasive this is, right, in our professional and personal lives. How would you answer today? Because I'm aware that your answer would very likely change 6 months or a year from now. But how would you answer today the question of how much AI is enough or what is too much?
Well, I guess I'll jump in there. Um, I think at this stage, the level of AI that I'm comfortable with at this stage is AI that prompts me. I like to prompt AI so it prompts me. Bob mentioned this earlier. I don't want AI making decisions for me. I don't want AI all the way completing tasks for me. I want AI to make my processes easier. It's a tool in my hand, but I am the one who's doing the work. So that's the guideline for me. I want to provide great prompts to AI so it can provide me with great prompts for my thinking. That's how I like to think about it. That's how I like to use it.
I like that. Bob or Marissa, any thoughts on that before we close out?
I mean, I echo that. I mean, it's like, I think it needs to be a helper, not necessarily telling me, what to do. I don't want it making decisions on my behalf. I think about my Spotify playlist, and sometimes there's good songs that's added, but I wouldn't want it going through and adding songs arbitrarily and forcing me to listen to them. So that would be out of control AI. Don't mess with my music. So suggestions are fine. I appreciate it. Good ideas, but at some point, the other thing I kind of worry about is AI getting a little too intrusive, where it's pounding me with stuff and really becoming a distraction, where it's where there's things we've got to do, and there are times when you feel like you're just getting blasted with information, none of what you asked for. You kind of walk by and kind of click a link and to look at a pair of shoes, and suddenly your inbox is full of emails from shoe providers, and it's like, okay, thanks a lot. I was just looking at it briefly. It's like, this wasn't me. I was serious, and then it becomes disruptive. And so I think that AI is going to have to be careful, because at some point it's going to wear out its welcome. Right now, it feels a little novel. At some point, it becomes creepy and disruptive. And I think that a lot of industry is trying to understand the right level to work with, interact with citizens on that.
I like that. Thank you. All right. Okay. Well,
just one other comment before we go. I wanted to thank Bob for putting all the links to artificial intelligence in the chat. If you haven't seen those and you're interested in any of those, and thank you, Bob, for doing that.
Okay. All right. Well, again, thanks to our panel. Thanks to everybody that took their lunch hour to listen in. I hope you benefited from this discussion. I know I certainly have benefited from this discussion. So really appreciate your time, and keep your eyes out for the next VEIAA Lunch and Learn. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Public Service Week. Bye.
Thank you. Enjoy.
Thank you so much.